Hello guys, welcome to my channel. And today I am going to clarify a short film called 2081, released in 2004. This movie got 7 out of 10 rating on Internet Database, and 73% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So, do not wasting you time. Let's begin. Film starts with a portrayal in the foundation that it is 2081. Lastly, everybody is equivalent in each area. Individuals aren't equivalent just by law or God, they are presently equivalent in every single way. No one is more astute, better looking, faster, or more grounded than any other person. The portrayal keeps saying that all balance is conceivable on account of the 211th, 212th, and 213th revisions done to the Constitution of the state. It was just conceivable on account of the endless cautiousness of the United States Handicapper General. The tough individuals are constrained to wear more weight to cause them to feel more vulnerable. The insightful wear earpieces that regularly fire radio clamors to get them far from taking uncalled for benefit of their mind. And the excellent individuals wear covers where their excellence can be found diverting. It is known as the brilliant time of equity. Regardless of all the equity, a few things about living are as yet not right. We are then, at that point, returned to a scene where some police officials barge inside a house to remove a fellow before his elderly guardians. Back in the present, the person's dad, George Bergeron, is attempting to fix the TV signal. Since he is wearing the earpieces as well, he can scarcely recall about his child being removed by the public authority. As he is occupied by little flashbacks of his child being hauled out, his better half Hazel advises him that he needs to fix the TV. He then, at that point, embeds a cylinder-like gadget behind the TV to begin it. The TV is showing an elegant ballet production being performed by a gathering of delightful women. The women are moving while at the same time wearing a few loads around their necks and arms. They are additionally wearing covers, so that they don't look better than anybody. In the meantime, George is again having a few flashbacks concerning the past. However, as he attempts to recollect more concerning the episode, the obstruction from the earpiece cuts him off. His significant other is likewise capable to hear the diverting commotion and asks him how it was, to which George answers that it was clearly. She makes reference to that she heard the sound of somebody hitting a milk bottle with a ball-peen hammer. She additionally adds that it should be great to hear unique sounds consistently. George answers that it isn't satisfying as it upsets him. Hazel further adds that assuming she was the Handicapper General, she would add the clamor of the rings, which would be satisfying to hear and would likewise respect the religion. She likewise imagines that she would make a great Handicapper General, and George consents to her sense. On the TV, we can in any case see the lovely young ladies playing out the ballet production. After some time, George again has the dreams of the cops removing his child, Halvorssen, powerfully. In any case, very much like the past occasions, he is occupied by the clamor in his earpiece. Seeing this, Hazel feels that he is recently worn out. What's more, recommends he could take some rest by putting the debilitations on the cushions. She feels that he generally is by all accounts exhausted and needs to cause him to feel woozy in any capacity conceivable. Nonetheless, George quickly denies her solicitation, also tells her that assuming he takes the impairments off for once, he will want to keep them off without fail. He likewise reminds her how she would feel on the off chance that he is without the impediment. Hazel answers that she would despise it, and he answers that they can fail to address that. Here, we get to realize that eliminating any type of handicap is a wrongdoing by law. Henceforth, everybody needs to comply with the principles, even at home. In the interim, the ballet production program on the TV is hindered to introduce breaking news. Hazel becomes frantic because of the interference for introducing the standard, worn-out news. As the news columnist attempts to introduce the breaking news, he stammers consistently, in view of which the transmission is halted for some time. Notwithstanding the squandered exertion, Hazel feels that the journalist made an honest effort to introduce the news. Also, his pay should be expanded by checking out his endeavors. This infers that every one of the residents have been conditioned into acting equivalent. Indeed, inside home, they show qualities of balance. After this, Hazel gets up from the lounge chair and heads into the kitchen to finish the dishes. While she is doing the dishes, the news resumes with another journalist. He says that they have gotten an admonition from the Handicapper General that a speculated rebel Halvorssen Bergeron has gotten away from the police guardianship. He presents that Halvorssen was captured 6 years prior for disseminator defacement, broadcast robbery, refusal to report his quarterly incapacitating assessments, also a glaring evacuation of his debilitations in a public spot. Regardless of the way that Bergeron was in close security, he evaporated marvelously. The correspondent instructs general society to know regarding him as he is a virtuoso and a competitor who is under-debilitated and amazingly risky. While George is paying attention to the news cautiously, Hazel can't hear it because of the water moving from the tap. The journalist then, at that point, closes his report mentioning the general population to contact the nearby specialists assuming they see Halvorssen close by. After the news is finished, the artful dance-moving program proceeds. Abruptly, the artful dance young ladies begin to hear some pounding sound. This is heard by everybody through the TV as well. George rapidly perceives the sound to be of his child Halvorssen and expresses his name. Halvorssen shows up with all his body anchored, hauling one of the safety officers to the stage. In the wake of coming to the stage, he begins asking everybody present there to be quiet and to pay attention to him. He leaves the safety officer he was snatching and lets everybody know that there is a bomb under the structure whose detonator is in his grasp. The other safety officers are seen drawing nearer him from behind, yet when he takes out the detonator they flee from the stage. Halvorssen then, at that point, unequivocally recommends everybody to remain in their seats. In the kitchen, Hazel is still washing the dishes and is totally ignorant about the occurrences occurring on the TV. At the theater, Halvorssen steps his leg noisily on the ground and apologizes with everybody present there for interfering with their amusement. He adds that ideally he could give some kind of diversion without anyone else. He then, at that point, presents himself and notices that he is an outlaw, a public danger and a plague of the capable. He likewise makes reference to himself as the most prominent man anybody has never known. Halvorssen further uncovers that he has been held detainee by the state throughout the previous 6 years with next to no preliminary and with torment which has no end. He clarifies that the state attempted to annihilate each hint of uncommon lying inside him, yet they couldn't do as such. He says that he is remaining before them being beaten, limped and nauseated, however not broken. Halvorssen then, at that point, says that they should obliterate the foe who is stowing away in the haziness. He proposes everybody to focus their lights so that all the world can see them. Subsequent to completing his discourse, he tears separated his debilitations and tosses them on the floor. The crowd in the theater are flabbergasted by this as they have been dazed by the public authority. At home, George is stunned to see his child doing this on TV. In the meantime, Hazel is as yet caught up with doing the dishes. In the following scene, as a person gets away from the theater, he runs over a brigade of furnished police powers alongside the Handicapper General. The head official gets some information about the status of the bomb, to which they answer that they will require an ideal opportunity to sort out it. We likewise see that different gatherings of the police powers are set at various areas. Inside the theater, Halvorssen requests a volunteer to show his next stunt. At the point when nobody from the crowd acknowledges to be his volunteer, he turns his head towards the gathering of ballet performers. One of the ballet performers hesitantly acknowledges and begins eliminating her impediment. At the point when she moves toward Halvorssen, he eliminates her cover and murmurs something into her ears. He then, at that point, requests that the performers play some music. Outside, the police power is prepared to enter the theater. All at once, Bunch E of the police power, the bomb subject matter experts, illuminate the head official that the bomb has been effectively incapacitated. The head official then, at that point, contacts the TV telecaster to stop the live transmission. Back inside the theater, Halvorssen is paying attention to the music played by live performers, yet he unexpectedly requests that they stop. He then, at that point, orders one of the cellists to play the violin for him. The cellist obliges in dread and starts playing the violin smoothly. The music alleviates everybody present in the crowd. At home, George is additionally partaking in the music being played. In any case, His delight transforms into melancholy as the transmission is halted surprisingly. The head official additionally gets a message from the telecom unit that the live transmission has been halted. He then, at that point, orders his units in general to hold on for passage into the theater. Inside, Halvorssen begins hitting the dance floor with the ballet performer, while grasping the detonator. As he detects that the soldiers are going to enter, he presses the detonator, which actuates one of the frameworks underground. While this doesn't explode anything, it continues the interfered with TV broadcast indeed. Seeing his child back on TV once more, George's face illuminates. In the meantime, Halvorssen and the ballet dancer proceed moving while the police power and the handicapper general enter the theater. She takes the head official's weapon and walks towards Halvorssen. All at once, the head official discovers through his earpiece that the occasion is being communicated in real time. He rapidly hurries to stop the handicapper general, be that as it may, it's past the point of no return. Halvorssen is shot by the woman, also he lies level on the stage. The head official arrives at the stage and the general at long last understands that she is on air. The transmission likewise closes. What's more, Hazel at long last wraps up doing her dishes. George is distressed by what he saw, however when he attempts to consider more he is hindered by the noisy recurrence from his earpiece. At the point when Hazel asks what's going on, he basically answers that he doesn't recall, yet he saw something tragic on the TV. Hazel then, at that point, proposes that he failed to remember tragic things like she generally does. The film closes as a confounded George gets up to get a few beverages from the cooler, while Hazel murmurs the music from the ballet production.